With professional recognition, a high-caliber lifestyle, and extraordinary wealth, Mohammed Shamji and Elana Fric were a power couple that many adored and envied. But unbeknownst to many who only saw the front facade of a successful and loving couple, things were going terrible behind closed doors. And with one of these two lovers bearing an unchecked and volatile pattern of behaviour, it was only a matter of time until one of them would snap. Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime. My name is Adrian, and in this video we're talking about the case of Mohammed Shamji and Elana Fric. This story serves as proof that no matter who you are, monstrosity is not conditional to your occupation, status, or background. And by the way, I post solved, unsolved, and strange cases here on a weekly basis, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing to Coffeehouse Crime. So let's dive straight into this turbulent relationship. Pull up a seat, grab a coffee, and sit back. This is the case of Elana Fric. Welcome to the city of Toronto. As the capital of Canada's province of Ontario, Toronto is a bustling city characterised by its multiculturalism, sports, and unique landmarks such as the CN Tower. Nestled against Lake Ontario, it's a stone's throw away from Niagara Falls, and less than 50 miles away from New York State. Over 10 million trees reside in Toronto, living in harmony with the greater area's population of over 6.5 million residents. And fun fact, but a staggering 88% of Canadians drink coffee, with the average Canadian consuming 6.5 kilograms of coffee beans per year. Before we settle into today's location, we must first travel 400 miles southwest to the often overlooked city of Windsor. Found directly across the Detroit River, Windsor appears to be a mere suburb to the greater area of Detroit. But in fact, Windsor is its own city in an entirely different country. And found within this picturesque city lived two Croatian immigrants, Joe and Anna Fric. Settling in Windsor to work at competing automotive companies Chrysler and General Motors, the married couple would eventually progress to have two children. Their oldest daughter was Carolina, being born in 1970, and finally Elana, who was born in 1977. Both of these girls were bright and intelligent, but Elana was particularly academic. She spent most of her childhood reading, dancing, and achieving straight A's at St. Anne's High School. And Elana was just as ambitious when it came to monetary gain, as every summer she would work in the cornfields just outside of Windsor. While at school, Elana was naturally gifted when it came to maths and science, and she had aspirations to one day become a doctor. The same as me actually, until engineering and then YouTube took over. By 10th grade, Elana had finally found herself a decent partner, and through their undergraduate years while at the University of Windsor, they were a very happy and strong couple. But after moving to Ottawa to begin medical school, the long distance formed cracks in their relationship, and unfortunately, Elana eventually called it off. Granted, this did create room for an exciting student lifestyle, and for the next couple years, Elana remained single. However, one night in 2003, all of that changed. While playing pool in the rec room of Ottawa Hospital, she set her eyes upon a new face. The man's name was Mohammed Shamji, and he was a neurosurgery student at the local hospital. Out of interest, he asked a few of the nurses who Elana was, and eventually, he caught her number. Mohammed was just as academically stellar as our bright young woman Elana. He graduated from Ashbury College, a well-renowned school, before moving on to Yale, where he successfully smashed a master's degree in organic chemistry. Mohammed was academically gifted, but he was also shy, socially distant, and even quite snobby. All of these traits at first glance making it quite difficult for him to catch a date. And this was no different when it came to Elana. While on their first date, Mohammed was very awkward with her. And despite unknowingly catching her attention and getting in her good books, he didn't know what to do with himself, and instead he actually asked her if he could set her up with his friend. Nice one. The two eventually started dating, but even from the very beginning, troubling signs were apparent. Elana was madly in love with Mohammed, so much so that she even felt unworthy of him. This was likely due to the fact that technically he was having an affair with her, as he continued seeing another woman that he'd previously met from college. This immediately caused discomfort and controversy in their relationship, and from the outset it seemed very one-sided. Elana often spoiled him with presents and kind actions, but on the other hand, Mohammed appeared lazy and disingenuous. This had even raised concerns from Elana's parents, who actually didn't want her to settle with him. And these problems forced Elana to break it off with Mohammed twice within their first year, but both times he persuaded her to come back. Pregnancy can often be unexpected, and unfortunately for Mohammed and Elana, this happened in the middle of a very unsure second year together. And for Mohammed, he found himself with his hands tied. Coming from an Ismaili Muslim family, it's highly expected to be married before having children. And whether he wanted it or not, he eventually decided to marry Elana to respect this, the two officially marrying in September of 2004. Moving into a house found on Scout Street in Ottawa, Elana and Mohammed settled into their jobs within family medicine and neurosurgery respectively. And by January of 2005, it was time. They welcomed their first daughter into the world. Unfortunately, this barely changed Mohammed's perspective. Still hell-bent on his career, he would often work and study overtime, and even while at home with his family, he would shut himself away. Unfortunately, Mohammed would never truly open his eyes to his wife's and his daughter's existence, and instead, the relationship between Elana and himself would slowly start to crumble. And as time passed, Elana's parents began to notice Mohammed being aggressive towards their own daughter, one time calling the home phone and, by accident, listening in to him verbally abusing Elana. She often threatened divorce, but Mohammed would shift the blame onto her, and instead he would call her parents to effectively tattletale on his own wife. By the summer of 2005, the relationship had become so turbulent and Mohammed's behaviour so unrestrained that the situation turned violent, Mohammed punching his wife in the face and leaving her with a split lip. In consequence, this left Mohammed in a very tricky situation, as the assault had led to charges being pressed against him. At the time, he was enrolling into a PhD at Duke University, and any criminal record would be sure to kill his degree and career. This sudden realisation forced Mohammed to beg his wife to drop all charges. He sweet-talked his way back into her arms, and ultimately highlighted that if she continued, his life was over. This is an important factor to highlight, as not only did it allow Mohammed to get away with his violent actions, but it would also enable future violations too. Eventually, these charges were dropped, and instead Mohammed entered a peace bond, subjecting him to 12 months of probation. Things began to settle down after this scare. Mohammed successfully enrolled into the University of Duke, the family moved to North Carolina, and they eventually slipped into an everyday suburban routine. Running in the mornings and marathons on the weekends became common practice. Their daughter attended daycare as the two focused on their professional careers. And Mohammed would actually complete his 5-year PhD in a mere 3.5 years. In the meantime, Elana was awarded a prestigious scholarship that paid off most of her tuition fees. And academically speaking, they were both rising stars in their respective fields. Following their graduation, the now family of 4 returned to Ottawa, Canada in the summer of 2009. And with Elana's studying now complete, she began her medical career at Ottawa's Family Hospital. But with Mohammed's dream to become a neurosurgeon, he was still heavily in training. The two would also go on to build their own online identities. Not that I have to tell any of you this, as I think it's fairly common knowledge, but social media can be very deceptive. I think I can speak for all of us here, but it's all too easy to browse social media and feel a certain level of emptiness. Whether we're suddenly staring at gorgeous tropical holidays, outrageously fine cuisines, special and expensive hobbies, or at some insane event, these snapshots are cherry-picked from the very best of our moments, and this desensitizes the pleasures in everyday living. And a lot of the time, it also drives people to show their lives as perfect, when actually, there can be a lot of pain, anger and suffering hidden behind that smile. This was no different when it came to Elana and Mohammed, as from the year 2012 onward, they began to portray themselves as the perfect power couple. Two extremely successful professionals who were madly in love and supportive of each other, often flying out to lavish conferences across the globe, with 3 beautiful children. And unfortunately, this immaterial facade masked what was actually happening behind closed doors. And very little did the world know that Mohammed was actually in control of both his and Elana's profiles. His aggressive behaviour slowly made its way back into their lives too. Arguments often ended in him shouting his way out of situations, or telling his wife that he would have been better with someone else. It was around this time that Mohammed was offered a fellowship at Calgary's Foothills Medical Centre, a perfectly suited learning experience for his aspirations to specialise in spinal surgery. This move left the rest of his family in Ottawa, and the couple would have to do a long-distance relationship for about a year. But maybe this was a good thing. After all, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Sadly, that was not the case. Throughout his many trips back home, Mohammed had accidentally left his email address logged in on the family computer, which eventually led to Elana accidentally discovering that he was once again having an affair. When confronted about the affair, Mohammed admitted it, and of course Elana, she was devastated. But despite this, and despite her friends telling her to leave, she stuck by him. Soon after this, the family figured it was time for a fresh start, and with that said, they decided to move to Toronto. They upscaled to a $1.5 million house in North York, and very shortly after this, conversations of having a third child came to light. Considering the shakiness of their situation, you'd have maybe expected the couple to slow down and figure things out rather than further commit. But maybe this was Mohammed's way of gaining further control. Well, soon enough, Elana fell pregnant, and by October of 2013, the family of 4 became 5, Elana and Mohammed welcoming their first son to the world. Things calmed down over the following 2 years. Elana's friendships in the local area bloomed, and Mohammed was kept occupied with his career. As finally, he had become a fully accredited neurosurgeon, specialising in spinal injuries and conditions. His reputation preceded him at work, Mohammed becoming known to be a highly prestigious doctor who could save patients from situations that other professionals would consider almost impossible. And Elana was moving through the ranks too, eventually becoming a delegate for District 11 of the Ontario Medical Association. Of course, their lives looked perfect from the outside. Many of those on social media had no knowledge of their rocky relationship. But sadly, things were not going well. On one occasion, a cut requiring stitches appeared on the palm of Elana's hand, and in another instance, she had a bruised neck. Friends were aware of this, and they questioned Elana on exactly what had happened, but unfortunately, excuses were always made. And by summer of 2016, further problems. Elana had suspicions that Mohammed was once again cheating on her, and as a result, she again threatened him with divorce. In fact, this suspicion caused Elana to look elsewhere too, and before she knew it, she too was having an affair with another doctor, who was also married and with children. Come fall, an invisible yet noxious gas had all but entirely choked the couple's relationship, and combined with a ferocious focus on their own professional livelihoods, were several glaring red flags that would usually end any marriage. Infidelity and assault danced throughout the room that they called love, a room that was burning down around them, whether they knew it or not. By late November of 2016, all was said and done. Elana had finally decided that enough was enough. Throughout the years of heartache, sacrifice, control, and abuse, Mohammed wasn't changing. And he really was the heartless, ruthless, aggressive man-child that friends and family had made him out to be. And with that said, she had finally made the decision to divorce him. On Friday, November the 25th, Elana attended a medical conference, networking alone without Mohammed. But this didn't stop him from congratulating her on Twitter. Arriving home Sunday evening, Elana handed the divorce papers to Mohammed. She lawyered up, and those lawyers demanded that he provided full financial disclosure. And Mohammed wasn't taking the change in circumstances well. Which is probably why friends and family were immediately suspicious when all of a sudden, Elana vanished into thin air. On Thursday the 1st of December 2016, 4 days since handing the divorce papers to Mohammed, Elana had abruptly become unreachable. Her mother Anna had spoken to her the night before, but pending bath time for her son, she had to get off the phone rather quickly, and now all text messages to Elana were seemingly ignored. When she tried to phone her instead, it elicited the same response: silence. When asked where his wife was, Mohammed declared that she had left in the middle of the night, suitcase in hand, to be with the man that she was having an affair with. But her parents didn't believe him. Anna knew Eleanor's neighbour relatively well. Aside from being Eleanor's former manager, they were also good friends. She was therefore asked to quietly check out the property, and upon inspection, Eleanor's car was still there. By the following morning, Elana's parents had arrived in Toronto. In fact, come 5 AM, they were at the front door. Their daughter's silence was unbearable, and they had a very concerning and sneaky feeling that Mohammed was in on it. With a spare key to the home, they allowed themselves in. The place was clean, but 2 rugs from the ground floor were missing, and the home phone seemed to be taken off from the wall. So casually, they began to cook breakfast for the kids. Hearing the commotion, Mohammed eventually walked downstairs and into the kitchen. Upon noticing it was Eleanor's mother and father, he said, "So you're the ones who called the police," before asking, "Are there any more of those crabs?" Following concerned parents and colleagues, authorities had already attended the house a day prior. And as said to her parents, Mohammed gave officers the same story. A story which didn't sound resemblant of the compassionate and caring mother of 3. She would never leave her children like this. Something wasn't right. And unfortunately, that heavy feeling of doubt rang true, as the very next day, a harrowing discovery was made. In the afternoon of December the 2nd, 2016, a fireman was walking his dog along the Humber River next to Nashville Road. Sunny with partial clouds and a temperature of 5 degrees Celsius, 41 Fahrenheit. A chilly but otherwise pleasant day in Toronto. Walking closer to the bridge's foundations, he noticed a suitcase which appeared to have been dropped from the road above. The suitcase looked full. Calling local authorities, officers attended the scene to investigate what was inside. And as they did, they found the body of a middle-aged woman. It was evident that she had been badly beaten, and officers wouldn't have to look hard for an early lead, as the suitcase had a name and address tagged to its side. The tag displaying Elana Shamji of North York. The body was taken in for examination, and in parallel, Eleanor's next of kin were notified. As a result, her parents were asked if they could confirm if this body was Eleanor's. Although her mother was shaken and brought to her knees, she couldn't actually recognise if it was Eleanor or not. Her father, on the other hand, he knew it was her. And unfortunately, just hours later, DNA tests would confirm that the body belonged to Elana Fric. Mohammed, on the other hand, was nowhere to be seen. In fact, his brother had flown in to support him, and the two were now travelling southwest through Mississauga. At around 8 PM, the two of them stopped to grab coffee, where a surveillance team noticed the pair meeting up with a man in a suit, likely for legal counsel. Authorities were now worried that Mohammed was going to flee the country with his brother. And I hope that coffee was the best damn cup he'd ever experienced, as shortly after this, police swarmed in to arrest Mohammed on suspicion of murder, making this coffee his last one as a free man. Likely the most heartbreaking part to this story is that Elana's death was partially witnessed by her own daughters. It turns out that in the early morning hours of December the 1st, an argument had erupted between Mohammed and Elana, and like previous altercations, this one sadly became violent. Elana had attempted to make one phone call over this time frame, to the number 611. It looks like, in a panic, she had tried to dial 911, and unfortunately, she'd missed the first digit by mere centimetres. Mohammed had always found it difficult to keep his cool, but with Eleanor's decision to divorce the man, his loss of control enraged him into a frenzy, and tragically, their eldest daughter heard it all. Walking to the bedroom and peeking through the door, she could see her father on his hands and knees on the other side of the bed. She couldn't see her mother or what was beneath him. But Mohammed ordered his daughter to go back to bed, and once the deed was done, he forced Eleanor's body into a suitcase before wheeling it out to the car. In a dazed panic, Mohammed didn't know what to do with the suitcase, and after driving all over Highway 50, he haphazardly threw the suitcase off of a bridge, hoping for the Humber River to carry it to Lake Ontario. But instead, unbeknownst to him, the suitcase landed on the river's bank. He then travelled home and pretended like nothing had happened. He made breakfast for his kids, drove them to school, made his way to work, and even made life-altering operations on his patients. To cover up his demeanour, he sent text messages to Eleanor's phone. One saying, "Good morning, not sure where you are. I guess I'll get the kids ready and take them to school. Please call." He then moved all of his family's liquid assets into his lawyer's trust account, which amounted to over $640,000. And then of course, Elana was found the next day. An autopsy report declared that she had suffered a broken neck and several broken ribs. The cause of her death was asphyxiation, and all of her hair had been hacked off before her body was discarded. A dark detail to note, but only 5 months before this ordeal, she had jokingly posted a picture to Instagram to say, "Two-striped Dr. Mo can break your neck and then fix it." Under the most cruel twist in events, this is what he eventually did to his own wife. Mohammed knew that the likelihood of him coming out of this situation as a free man was next to impossible. And although he at first declared his innocence, he eventually took a plea deal several months later, and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, which would spare his own 12-year-old daughter from taking the stand during trial. He told the court, "Mine was the ultimate act of betrayal to a woman who gave so much to so many people, especially me." As a result, Mohammed was consequently found guilty for second-degree murder of Elana Fric, and being Canada, he was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 14 years behind bars, which means he could see freedom as early as the year of 2030. After court adjourned, the Fric family confirmed they were satisfied with his plea, but they did admit that they would have preferred for Canada to have the death sentence, as life behind bars isn't punishment enough. Naturally, they hope he never gets the chance to be released.
Any question you want.
Are you happy though with the outcome today? Not a good word maybe.
It's okay. It's okay.
You said you wanted justice all along. Do you feel you got justice today?
Justice will never be for us. Never.
Yeah.
The only justice we will have if she can come back, and she will never come back.
How are the children?
They're fine. Thank you for asking. They're doing fine.
Following Elana's death, questions are once again raised over domestic violence, what the warning signs are, and how these situations can be avoided. It was noted that many friends of Elana, both professional and not, knew of Mohammed's grievous ways. Sadness and grief were felt through Elana's family, friends, and the communities that knew her. She was described as a talented professional who helped to improve the healthcare system, was a fantastic mother to her 3 children, and an excellent daughter to her parents. She was smart, educated, financially independent, and surrounded by a devoted support network. And when she finally realised and acted upon her own self-worth, the man that she had married had become an even greater demon. Elana's funeral was held on December 17th, 2016, at the same church where she was baptised and married. Her parents, Anna and Joe, temporarily moved into the house where she had died, so that her children could maintain a normal life as much as possible. Eventually, they all moved house together. At least to me, this case highlights that no matter your circumstances or class, or how successful you appear on social media, you don't quite know what's happening behind closed doors. As for Mohammed, who appears to be a well-educated professional, he sure as hell lacks emotional intelligence and common restraint. And for a medical man who saves lives on the regular, you'd have thought he'd have been smart enough not to destroy the lives of his own wife, his children's, both sides of the family, and his own. Mohammed's actions actually had a ripple effect on his patients. Since he was such a highly regarded neurosurgeon, many people were left without a doctor which was experienced enough to perform surgery on them. This has left dozens upon dozens of people with conditions such as EDS unable to have life-changing operations. So unfortunately, he screwed up many other lives in the process. Unfortunate for him, and regardless of parole, his medical license has been revoked for life. That just about brings us to the end of today's video, folks. Thank you so much for watching another one. If you found this video interesting or you learned something new today, then please remember to like the video and subscribe if you haven't yet. What are your thoughts of Mohammed Shamji? Is life without parole the only warranted option? Please share your thoughts in the comments down below. That just about does it, folks, but thank you again for watching, and of course I'll see you again real soon in the next one. Until that moment arrives though, look after each other. Goodbye.